Here, a wonderful little passage, and again, it's all about the same thing. It's all different, shedding light from somewhat slightly different angles on the same central core. I once said in a convent that the true image of the soul is found when nothing is informed or outformed but that which is God Himself. The soul has two eyes. Two eyes. An inner and an outer eye. The inner eye of the soul, by the soul, by the way, you could say here, it's used in a very loose way. It's your consciousness. The soul has two eyes, in an inner and an outer eye. The inner eye of the soul is the one which perceives being and receives its own being directly from God. This is the activity which is particular to itself. The outer eye of the soul is that which is directed towards all creatures, and which perceives them in the manner of an image and the function of a faculty. But they who are turned within themselves so that they know God according to their own taste and in their own being are freed from all created things and are secure in themselves in a very fortress of truth. Just as I once said that on Easter Day our Lord came to His disciples through locked doors, so too God does not enter those who are freed from all otherness and all createdness. Rather, He already exists in an essential manner within them. God does not come to you. One could almost say God is freed from within you, comes through you. Now the two eyes, important. The two eyes are, of course, consciousness directed outward into sensory perception of all the physical forms, but outward, consciousness directed outward also means consciousness flowing into thought activity, because even thinking is outward. So the eye, the one eye of consciousness that looks outward, is that which is the consciousness becoming thought forms and mental formations and perceiving physical things, but they all become inner forms. When I perceive a flower, it becomes an inner image. So that's this eye that is directed outward. And many humans are lost. They only live in that outward looking and seeking state of consciousness. Master Eckhart then points to the possibility of activating the inner eye of consciousness, that so you can almost visualize it like you can visualize it as a spotlight. Here you have thought activity and sense perceptions where most humans live, but you can also have an awareness of an underlying, whatever you want to call it, presence, stillness, spaciousness is there. That's the second eye that looks within. So you can look without and be aware of the two at the same time. And then that is the state of connectedness. And ultimately, that's what Master Eckhart would call then the Godhead, the uncreated. It's pure awareness, pure beingness. That's always there at this very moment. There's the external, and there's the consciousness behind it, which has no form. Let's call it, I often call it stillness. Can you sense the stillness at this very moment, although you are listening and seeing? So you're the listening and the seeing, but you are more fundamentally the stillness. So you're rooted in that. I haven't read any quote today from Meister Eckhart about time, but he often talks about the greatest obstacle to God realization, he says, is time. Of course, he talks about psychological time. And psychological time is inseparable from the activity of thought. So he taught undoubtedly from this inner realization. Unlike most philosophers who just play with concepts. And we don't know how many of his listeners, especially the many women he taught, awakened spiritually. Probably quite a few. So even in what we call the Dark Ages, when he lived, there were always the flame of consciousness, of spiritual awakening, somehow, miraculously, was still being kept alive in a few. Religion as a whole at that time was dominated by superstition and fear and a lot of madness, and yet there was also the others present. So you can read some more Meister Eckhart if you feel inclined, or maybe what we did today was enough. You've heard enough pointers. If you read him, then don't read too much at a time, just the same as, for example, especially a book like Stillness Speaks, read very little at any one time, so you're not there to absorb information, but to allow the reading to be transformational. It's a meditation. These things are not there to give you more knowledge, but really the opposite. They are not there to add on to you, but to remove. Not that it can do it for you. You still have to relinquish for yourself that which is recognized as illusion. The continuous pointing back by Eckhart to oneness, not only the concept of oneness, but also the realization of oneness, the one behind the many. That ultimately all the things that we see outside, the diversity, is rooted in the one. And that is at the core of your being. A strange coincidence that I'm sure Eckhart didn't know about is that the first part of his name, Ek, is actually in the ancient language of India, the Sanskrit, actually means one. And I'm sure he never heard of Sanskrit. He didn't need to, because the truth is within the ultimate truth. But it's a little synchronistic event for a person whose teaching is focused on the one, to have this one as part of his name, and he didn't even know it. Probably, I assume, we don't know it, Meister Eckhart also sat in stillness before or after or during his sermons. I'm sure there were periods of stillness. He wouldn't just be talking about it. The stillness would be there, behind the words, between the words, and probably also moments of stillness, like now, a few words here, right now, but mainly stillness behind the words. Not just as the absence of sounds, but as a living presence within you. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed our session. And that it was more than listening to words, more than concepts, but tasting the reality behind the words, the concepts. Thank you.